Hi, everybody, and welcome back to RHAP's coverage of The Anonymous. We have stepped out of the shadows, once more unanonymized ourselves in a manner of speaking. We're back after the finale to talk through the first season of The Anonymous, now that we have seen it all play out. I, of course, am not alone here. I am joined, as I was for the first 3 episodes, by Pooya. Pooya, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Mike. It's an honor to face off with you one more time for this season because let me tell you, we were onto something in that first recap. This show is promising. I think this format is promising. I feel like the cast delivered a great season when all is said and done, and it was a delight to get to watch it.
Yeah, completely agree. So, we are talking about not only the finale of The Anonymous, but the season as a whole. We're going to talk about a lot of the decisions that were made, both by the players and by production. Maybe go through a bit of like a walk down memory lane of some of the standout
Mhm.
characters, obviously, get into the winners game. And then maybe talk about what we'd be looking to do for a possible season 2. Because I do agree with Puya, largely, especially for a first season of a brand new game structure. I think there is a lot of promise to this. With a few minor tweaks, I think we really have a hit on our hands. So we're trying to manifest it out here. Of course, if you want to check out some of our conversations with some of the people we're about to get into, Puya and I had the great pleasure of talking with all 6 people who made the finale. Nearly a third of this cast basically we talked to over the course of one podcast, including the winner, the 3 people who made the final face-off, as well as the 2 other people eliminated in the finale. That podcast and video should already be in your feeds at this point if you want to check it out. A lot of great insights from everybody there that we'll surely bring into this discussion. But safe to say, we are going to be spoiling the results of the full first season of The Anonymous. Let this be your warning. It is now readily available for you to binge, which may work better, Pooya, than the people who are watching week to week, who unfortunately had to deal with those cliffhangers going into each and every episode as to not finding out who would be eliminated until the beginning of next week.
Yes. So I feel like that is one of the only like main flaws of the episodic release itself. Also worth noting, I know that this is going to get released before the finales on Hulu, which I know a lot of you are going to be waiting for that Hulu drop. So again, warning, don't check this out till the start of the week, then the next week. But the cliffhangers were tough because, and I feel like we've talked about this with some other shows. I feel like Netflix does this a lot with their reality shows as well, which is you save the blocking, the elimination until the beginning of the next episode, which is tough because at that point you're leaving us with a list of 2 potential people who are going, but you remove all of the suspense of who that's going to be. And I don't even fault them because I think if this was a format run a decade ago, it could hit. But right now, we are truly in a very saturated market with these shows where someone who's watching The Anonymous is watching 5 other shows that are reality TV competition shows. And we're going to forget how we felt. You know, those emotions are going to get wiped off and refreshed. I'm not going to have the same level of, yes, this person went out a week later. I've moved on, you know? So that you get robbed from. But I'll tell you this, as someone who ended up watching from episode 4 on a binge, it hit real nice.
Yeah, it flows really smoothly because I guess the advantage is we do then immediately go into the aftermath of like, oh, so-and-so's gone. Let's sort of recover from not only their elimination, but the reveal of their handles, and also who do we think the Anonymous was. And it does interestingly set up what happens next. To your point, it comes at the cost of losing the momentum for the elimination, which I think for some games serve as the sort of climax of each and every episode. But what I would say is that overall, the journey of the season was really interesting. I mean, hell, Pooya, we covered the first 3 episodes thinking we knew how the game was going to go. Then the first episode that we end up getting off here, they completely basically reset the game from square one with everyone getting new handles and then bringing 3 more people in. I mean, that's the biggest, I think, set of twists and deviations from the norm that we got. We'll certainly get into it with the final face-off, but I was a bit surprised to find these sort of like bluffing game appear so habitually as it does now. It makes a lot more sense in retrospect. So yeah, when we were talking about this a couple of months ago, we were bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, right? We're like, this is fun. We're trying to figure it out. The players are trying to figure it out. This has a lot of potential to it. Now that we have one official season under our belt, how are you looking back at this, Pooya?
Okay, so first I want to address the episode 4 twist, because a lot of people and shout out to those of you who wanted more coverage.
Yes, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, a lot of people were like, have you watched episode 4? I was like, no, I can't do it right now because I know I'm not going to get to talk about it. And everyone's like, I didn't love that twist. I didn't love that twist. And I didn't really know what it was. And then to realize that it was a reset, initially, I can see why people weren't loving it, because you just made the last 3 episodes feel like not needed. You could just start on episode 4 and you're like, oh, brand new game. Okay, whatever. But I think that the handle refreshes were a great call, because I think what we could have been falling into was the same person just nailing and getting the anonymous every week. And I think having the handle refreshes was great. I feel like even the bringing 3 new people in a la the circle was not bad, especially once you realize that they didn't keep bringing people in after that. That was it. I think that was a key thing that was needed. Just do it the one time and bring them in. And I feel like of the 3 people they brought in, definitely injected their own set of storylines into the game, which I think was necessary. And I do love the way it worked out, where we had one of them go out immediately, one of them go out in the middle, and then one of them go out in the finale. They really, they made it throughout the story.
Yeah, and the intruders aspect was very interesting in that regard. And to your point, I mean, we talk about this all the time on the circle. Like, if you have to bring new people in, make it as early as possible so it doesn't feel A, unfair to the current players, and B, unfair to these latecomers of like, they don't really stand a chance if they are really like the last ones in the door. They haven't really gleaned any opinions one way or the other about people. Yeah, the handle refresh I was confused about initially until I saw that they brought new people in, because that would make a lot of sense. Obviously, an easy thing to deduce if it's like, who are these 3 new profiles? Okay, now we just need to mix and match
one of
those
these 3
together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do wonder. I was trying to figure out, like, from a ratio perspective, right? Like, we started with 12 and then we added 3. Would it have been better or worse to do like 9 and 6 or even 7 and 8? But I do think that 3 new faces felt like the adequate amount. I think 4 and especially 5 or more maybe would have been a lot, to just like throwing them all in and also making it really feel like, yes, the first 3 episodes were truly useless. But it does lead to these very fun moments that when the OG players reveal themselves, they're like, before I was Cactus, I was, Lollipop. And then all the OG people are saying, oh my God, I can't believe it. And you have like Bisma and Victoria just standing there saying, okay. Sure, why not?
Yeah. Well, I kind of felt like that as a viewer a little bit, where in the beginning, I was very keen to figure out, okay, because I love a good reveal. I love a good reveal and a good reaction. I'm a big react content guy. So I was ready for that. But once we get to like episode 10, I don't quite care that you were the alien once upon a time. You know what I mean? Like, that's not going to really, I'm not going to remember what the alien did like that. So it didn't land quite as much, but obviously you need to put that in there because the reactions of the players matters more. And that was a lot of fun to see.
Yeah, and so then they also do another profile refresh as well, which maybe, especially in hindsight, really like the first one too, that it didn't feel sort of like a one-off aberration. And it also felt like a really nice point in the game too, where I think the point of the anonymous as a concept is that ideally you don't want players to figure out who is who. This is not that type of game. And so I think giving everyone kind of a clean slate ended up working out really well. I mean, we'll get into this with our cast of characters. Someone like Lily made really good on the first refresh by being like, these are the mistakes I made last time. And also everyone assumes I'm this handle. Let me completely come in now with a different personality and be able to, show a lot of success from that. And then we see in the second refresh, Christopher should pretty much just be wearing a sign on his avatar that says, hello, my name is Christopher, because he is just so brazen. He's himself in the first one, then he's trying so hard not to be himself in the second one. And then by the third one, he finally figures out that Goldilocks happy medium. And look what happens. He immediately becomes the anonymous. So
right.
I think it was a nice opportunity to not only keep players on their toes, but also give players the opportunity to be able to learn and make up for previous mistakes.
I agree. I think not only that, the other thing that I really liked about it was you see someone like Andy, who starts picking up on mannerisms from other avatars and then starts using them in his own rebrand so that people think that he is whoever they thought Lipstick was, for example, which ended up being Chris. I think that the learning curve on the game was set up in a way where if you biffed your first chance at an anonymous, you could just redo it, which I think was really good. And I feel like it allowed people to never feel down in the dumps, never feel like they're completely out, and just try again. And I think that that is a format change that we don't quite see in other shows. So it was very nice to see essentially one player get 3 chances at the same thing. Because some people were strong and they just kept getting stronger. Some people really pivoted after the first rebrand to like the second rebrand to the third rebrand. So I was a big fan of that.
Yeah, that's ideally what you want a game to be, right? You don't want the die or dice to be cast in this case from the beginning, which we can certainly talk about with somebody like Jack, who like was very strong early on, but then started petering out towards the middle of the game. It's about either keeping up that momentum or really flaming, I suppose, to use a handle from our winner here at the right time. What's also interesting as well, Pooya, is you and I talked in the first 3 episodes of, can you vote for yourself using your handle? And we talked about, is that allowed and the benefits and drawbacks of doing so. And we see it being used a few times as well from people like Lily and Andy, who again catch on towards the end and realize, okay, maybe the best thing to do to remain anonymous is not only to like throw people you wouldn't suspect to throw under the bus, but also put yourself up for elimination. It became that people were becoming less fearful, I think, of like actually being nominated if it meant that if this gives me a better chance of basically winning safety through being anonymous anyway.
Yeah, I think if you are thinking that there's going to be 2 nominees and you're one of the 2, it makes sense to just throw the vote on yourself anyway at that point, because first of all, it's tucked away in between like 3 other nominees. You can be fine. Second, if they don't figure you out, if they don't assume that you nominate yourself, because who would do that, then you're in a good spot. I think the only way that goes sideways is if you were like the one rogue nomination on yourself amongst like 4 people and someone says, you know what, I'm not seeing you come up in a minute. Let me just vote you out if I get anonymous. That's where your drawback is. It's definitely risk versus reward. I think that depending on who you are, it's not a bad shout. I think someone like Jack, who legitimately was not being nominated and was getting anonymous and was doing well in the challenges and was doing well in the house, like eventually someone's going to take that shot at you. So getting yourself nominated early isn't that bad. And also, I'll say this much, just getting nominated early isn't bad. Look at Andy. Again, the man was getting nominated so much in the beginning, and same with Lily, that by the end, they were able to just ride it out because they're always expected to be there, which always made it look like there's bigger fish to fry.
I mean, that was the thing with Marcel, right? I mean, yes, he had a good record in the face-offs, but like when he wasn't winning face-offs, he was almost always in the line of fire. And it sort of became this Pawn Star situation where it's like, well, we know that someone could always get rid of Marcel. And so I want to get rid of somebody now that feels more meaningful. And when you look at that, Marcel survives long enough that when a profile refresh happens, he wins the last 2 anonymouses in a row. And also to your point about how not being nominated can work for and against you. I mean, 2 of the last people nominated were Xavier and Nina, and people were looking at that. You know, I got the chance to talk with Xavier after he was eliminated, and he said that like that was a very easy thing to put on his back of, see, everyone likes this guy. He's the last person to ever be put up for nomination. That's why we got to get rid of him, and why everyone kind of turns on him en masse.
Yeah, I would hate to be in that position where you just come up once in the first like 6 rounds and suddenly everyone's like, this might not happen again. Let's just get him out here when we can. You don't want to be in that spot at all. I find that the other thing I really like about this format is that all it takes is one person to nominate you and you're on the chopping block. I feel like this is a great way to combat a like group of 7 or 8 people banding together, because ultimately you still get to nominate a person. It's not like a vote where you are like, well, it's going to be an 8-1 vote. My vote doesn't matter. Your one vote could put someone else on the block that could end up being the bigger fish for somebody else, which is not a bad shout.
Yeah, and what I also found so interesting, at least from my perspective, is that towards the end of the game, because there were so few people, the
Hmm.
power of the anonymous not only obviously became more, like overweening, but also, I don't know, it got a little HOH-y to me, Pooya, especially when you look at like some of Marcel's final decisions, and he's like, okay, do I go after the couple here, or do I get rid of this big threat right here? When you have those unilateral decisions, we do see some people make more individualistic decisions down the line. Because then there's also the sort of meta thinking of, okay, depending on who I eliminate, then people could say, okay, who would want to eliminate X? Clearly, we have to go after this person. And so it's also then thinking through, let me go after people who are not only going to be better for my game if they're eliminated, but also won't immediately point me out as the anonymous. Because if they get some sort of sniff as to who my profile is, I could easily get nominated and I easily can't be the anonymous again.
Yeah, I feel like the showmance in this equation of Victoria and Christopher was kind of the perfect shield for so many of these other players, because you're always going to look at a pairing that are very much tight in person and say, we can't have that be at the end. And I was like, yeah, we can't have that be at the end. So then people would put their nominations there, which allows you to tuck a nomination at someone else. And then if you win, you keep them in, but you've been very vocal about wanting to get rid of them. What you don't want is kind of what happened to Jack, which is vocalize that you want the coupling gone, but then play nice to one of them and then have Nina sell you out.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we nearly though got like a Big Brother 21 Jackson Holly situation where like if either Victoria or Chris wins that final anonymous, then
Mm-hmm.
they're both in that final face off, and then everyone kind of gets egg on their face for keeping them in that long. I mean, I love this as well. This was quite a surprising dynamic to say the least. Like when we got Chris and the first boot kind of being schmoopy, we're like, yeah, this is a new game, and so there are some people that might try to mac on each other early on. But I'm glad we're done with that. And then Victoria comes in, and to say again, it was like starting from square
Episode
one would be an
one.
understatement, because then Chris decides to do it again, and obviously much more successfully. I mean, spoiler alert for our interviews, maybe not so successfully outside of the game, as they are no longer seeing each other, despite maybe the plans they made on camera. But give me a reaction to this, Pooya, this coupling from both a storyline perspective as well as a strategic perspective.
It's so wild to me because obviously as a married man now, when I picture being on these shows, showmance is not in the cards for me. But in a game like this where there's an anonymous mode where people are going to dig into whatever you're doing, that's the difference between this show and like a Big Brother, where it's like, oh, the showmans are a threat, but like we'll say it in the shadows so no one can hear us, and then if you win, I'll be in your ear telling you to put them up. Here it's like, oh, they are a problem, let's whisper amongst each other. Oh, I'm alone now. Yeah, screw them. They're such a big target. We need to look at them. So to be that comfortable, to essentially be like, nah, we're gonna keep cuddling. We like the cuddles. Listen, I love a good cuddle. Make no mistake about it. Cuddling is delightful. But in a game like this, I do not want that target on me. Why am I gonna cuddle? But at the same time, I'll give them this. This is a game where people will say whatever they want in an honest mode. They could have never cuddled and just made eyes at each other, and they still would have gotten the accusation. So you might as well have your fun at that point.
That's the thing. Maybe it's also like a bit of pent up, many things I should say are pent up of like, well, listen, I'm in anonymous mode and I have to be so secretive about who I am. So I'm just going to be brazenly myself out in the open when I get time in the square house and the circle house. But I mean, to your point, you mentioned earlier, it was also just a fantastic smokescreen for everyone, including Chris and Victoria, to use an anonymous mode. Like, I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
after things start becoming explicit, every chat had some version of, we got to get rid of that couple tonight. And that sort of always became the smokescreen for what it was actually happening. These two basically were a combined version of Q from Survivor 46 of like, well, we could always go after the couple. And so at least one of them was almost always nominated. But when the anonymous came into power, it was either them or it was somebody else that thought, yeah, you know what? There's two of them at this point, but there's nothing that makes me feel like they're of such a large danger that they need to be split up right now.
Yeah, and I feel like Victoria did a really good job of from early nominating Christopher on multiple occasions to the point where she is able to carve a couple of anonymouses under her belt, which I think was not easy to do, especially coming into a brand new group of people and trying to settle in. So kudos there, because I feel like getting those nominations in early kind of made everyone never consider Victoria as was a cactus.
Yes, it was Cactus who she was.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it was good.
I no, it's good. I think again, like she was able to show a lot of success behind the scenes, especially during that second phase when again Chris was a little bit more out in front, even in anonymous mode. Then it was kind of interesting to see the two of them kind of like swap places in the power rankings a little
Mhm.
bit. Also benefited from the fact that Chris was very close with Nina, and especially when Nina was coming to power, either from her own perspective as the anonymous or others close to her, that it was a little bit more of like, okay, I'm going to go after Victoria because she's someone that I can get less of a read on than
Mhm.
Chris, which was very important for how the season ended. And to your point earlier about, listener feedback, I got a good amount after the finale aired with honestly a lot of mixed emotions as to how they felt about the way the game ended, which is
Mhm.
not the regular rounds that we're used to seeing. Anonymous mode ends when Marcel determines who finishes in fifth place. We end with a face-off with them playing the game they played, what, 3 or 4 times over the course of the season, where you have the boxes in front of you and one of them says win and 3 of them say
Mhm.
lose, and you have to figure out who's bullshitting you and who's telling the truth. We saw this happen a few times over the course of the season. I'd love to get your thoughts on it, Pooya. What I will say, what I'll give the show kudos for, is at least giving them some advance notice as to how this was going to end. This was
Yes.
not a Survivor, Heroes, Healers, Hustlers, Final Four fire making situation where like they got there and then all of a sudden they realize it's a final face off. It was actually able to be played into their decision making towards the end, where
Yes.
like if Marcel isn't the anonymous, there's a chance he might get taken out before the final face off because he's so good at it. A reason why Victoria ends up getting taken out the way that she does is because they feel like, okay, as much as the couple protects us for most of the game, if we have two people that can fundamentally read each other on a certain physical and emotional level,
Mhm.
then they're basically shoo-ins to sort of work together and maybe collude to win at the end of the day. So I do like, whatever you feel about actually using it as an ending device, they at least gave the players notice it would be the ending device.
Yeah, I'm happy they gave them the notice on it. It's funny watching it on a binge that you start realizing the face off matters. Oh, the face off is coming back again. Oh, it's like every other challenge is the face off, huh? Oh, it's going to be the last challenge. Okay, so they've been getting practice. So there was some intrigue for me of like, okay, all this practice, who wins? Who got this? The other side of me was thinking about some other ways the game could have ended. Should this have been a la The Mole, where,
Mm.
at the very end, they do a big quiz of, okay, here's all the things. Who do you think is the mole? Should this have been a quiz of, okay, you've spent like a whole 2-3 weeks here together. Whoever has the most matches on the profiles that are of the people remaining. And by that, I mean, you have to guess all 3 of their profiles or all 2 if they're one of the, one of the latecomers. Should that have been the mechanic?
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. I mean, the thing that would have made it a little too simple would be the fact that they'd only have to match 3 profiles because
That's the
remember,
right as
everyone
I
else
said
revealed
that.
themselves.
I
So
was
it's
like,
like,
yeah.
so it would have been maybe not nearly as comprehensive of a quiz
Mhm.
as the mole. I don't think they should have done some sort of like jury vote among all the eliminated
No.
contestants, but maybe what they do is like one final round where you do one final reset, where like you pick profiles A, B, and C, and you do one final anonymous chat. And then who knows, maybe then the eliminated players will do their own form of the test. And then whoever wins there becomes the most anonymous of the anonymous.
Yeah, or like something like that to be the lead in to this final face off. Because I will say that final challenge was pretty much built for Christopher to win it. Or sorry, for or Marcel to win it. Like they had a leg up on the competition there, which I was like, I feel like if this was a little bit more equitable, I would have liked it better. But I think ultimately, Mike, and I don't know what your thought is on this, if there was to be a season 2, I think you can't do the face-off to this extent again. Either it's like a 1 or 2 times during the season, something different for the end game, or you make it the end game, because it truly felt like, okay, we've already seen this. It's no longer special. The face-off is. So that's kind of where I landed on it. I think it's a great challenge. I really do. I think this is a very fun challenge to use in a game show like this. But I think that the magic wears off after a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to think in terms of other endgame devices like a jury vote or a final challenge, like how much did it translate to the rest of the game? And it does and it doesn't, right? Because the entire concept of this challenge is to obscure what you're truly holding. And that is a combination of being truthful about some things and being deceitful about other things. And that is kind of anonymous mode. It does feel to me still a few steps removed from like what the vast majority of the game was. Yes, we did do the face off a few times, but the other 88% of the game did not necessarily matter in the end
Yeah.
here. And it's tough because I don't want it all to not matter. Like, I liked Marcel getting an advantage for being the final anonymous. I did not like the advantage he got. Where basically
No.
he's like, "Yep, screw you, Christopher. You're not going to win because you're going to pick first here." Unless like it was just an absolute boneheaded series of mistakes on everybody's part. You know, it almost reminds me of like the traitors end game. Pooya, you're the traitors guy. Be like, I personally go back and forth as to whether or not I like the traitors end game and how it compares to what we see the rest of the season. That's kind of where I'm sitting with the anonymous, and that like it was a fine option, albeit a weird one. I think there are better ones. I think there are far worse ones. I do think, to your point, I would not want to see it again as the end game device for season 2.
Yeah, I think now you've got to change it up. And, you know, with the Traitors one, I've also gone back and forth on it, where I'm like, okay, Fire of Truth, should you reveal whether they got it right or wrong at this point? Like, because if you do, they're just going to mathematically keep going. I'm not sure. I've always been a proponent of, if they somehow get all the Traitors out by Final 6, you stop giving them reveals and they basically dog eat dog. Like, they got to just, it's like, well, they're all faithful, but let's see how much they trust each other to win the pot. With this, I was thinking about it, Mike, as we were talking about the whole like quiz thing. What if, and this might not have to be the whole cast, it could be like, let's say from a certain cutoff point, you're like, this is technically the jury, but no vote. Hear me out. What if the people voted out? As they get voted out, they have to pick a new avatar, okay? And then at the end, they all enter the anonymous mode chat, and there's like a conversation that's happening there where they're talking about the finalists, whoever's left, the 4 remaining.
A jury roundtable, if you will.
Yeah. And the people, the players still in the game are in spectator mode. They can't react. They can't interact. They just have to watch people talk about the finalists and what they think of them through anonymous mode. And then there's a quiz, and it's like, all right, match all the people to all the people that got voted out. What about that?
That's interesting. So it's almost turning it on them, that it's less so about, okay, trick others. It's, can you sniff other people out? I mean, that's interesting because, again, the conceit of the anonymous was that you wanted to remain anonymous, but that you wanted to sort of evade the targeting. So it does turn the onus onto them, but I'm not particularly mad at it either. Like, I think it still stays thematic to the game. It does involve the others in a way that it just doesn't feel like, you know, okay, you can only work within a limited range of options. It also brings the cast back, which is a thing that I do love about these shows as well. As much as I do love the sort of like gone and forgotten, once you're eliminated, you're gone for good. I'm assuming they keep them around as the season is airing. So it could be an opportunity to bring them in. Plus, gets a better use out of all the money you gave that graphic designer to make all these random avatars for the entire season.
Right. And I think that I agree with you. I don't want it to be some kind of a jury vote. With the nature of this game, with there being an anonymous one where people just say whatever they want to say, I feel like you don't want that to be the case, especially because someone could leave the game. Their mind's still on the game. So if someone trashed me and then I left and that avatar's still in the game, I'm going to try and figure out who that is. I'm going to like marinate on it. And if I think it's somebody, I'm not going to give them my vote. You know what I mean? I don't want that to be the case. But I like the idea that it incentivizes you to get to know your fellow like house guests or castmates, to the point where that's going to pay dividends potentially later. And that doesn't have to be the you win the game. That could be the you win the advantage for the final or something. That kind of, or like that's how you get the final anonymous to eliminate somebody. I feel like that could be fun because to your point, when we get to that very end game, there's like 4 or 5 people. I feel like you must be sitting on like 2 out of 5 correct. And then you're just going to like move around these two and be like, okay, maybe I get it. It's a lot more like luck based. Whereas in the beginning, yeah, you can play it luck and just go, I'm just going to try and fit this square peg in the circle hole, see if it fits. I think later down the line, it's a little bit more, that strategy could pay off a little bit more. So I like this as kind of like a change it up a little. And also, if you have a great stellar cast, which I think they did, you're utilizing them a little bit more for like one last hurrah of them all being in the anonymous mode again without the pressure of winning the game. They can just speak their mind about these people, kind of almost like a mini roast, which I know you and I do love a good roast.
Yes.
So I'd be down for that.
That'd be very fun, especially considering the fieriness with which some people walked out of this game. I know they would have a lot to say about those that are left. When you talk about this great and stellar cast, I do not disagree at all. Let's get into them a little bit. So we figured, again, since we are talking about this season kind of en masse, the best way to do it would be, we'll sort of unfortunately not mention the 3 people that were eliminated in the first 3 episodes / the beginning of the 4th episode. Thank you for your service in a manner of speaking. We'll talk about the people who were eliminated in the time since we've been away and talk a little bit about our overall thoughts on them, their elimination, their impact on the season, etc. And let's start with Robbie, who definitely shocked the world a little bit. Probably one of the biggest reveals, I would say, of the season, Pooya, besides Lily as Robot, was, oh my God, Robbie was actually Dice.
Yeah, which honestly, I loved the strat of picking something that is kind of on the nose for what people may think yours is, which we did see backfire later. And then we saw the complete opposite of, I'm going to pick something no one would ever think is me for Christopher. Immediately is like, all right, well, that's Christopher. Robbie was so much fun. I was so happy that Robbie made it as far as she did, because there were a lot of moments in the beginning where I thought, I don't love Robbie's odds of lasting it here. I kind of wish Robbie would have made it to the reset. Past the reset a little longer, because that would have been fun to see. Gone a little too soon. Robbie probably my, if this was a pre-jury conversation, one of my favorite pre-jury people, so to speak.
Yeah, we love a chaotic queen, and she certainly was. Like, even she's like, I'm not entirely sure what I'm doing. I mean, this is what we love from the first season of these new games. It's just people trying shit, and like, Robbie was successful for a while of being able to convince people that she wasn't Dice, and was one of those first examples of like really being able to do the like they don't know meme of her in the corner talking about how, everyone hates Dice when she was actually Dice the entire time. So it was very fun. I think provided one of the first big face cracks of the season when she got to reveal her handle. And then Pooya, this guy Wayne shows up. Talk about causing chaos. Just tries to set off as many grenades at the game as he can, and then is booted right afterwards.
Wayne, I feel like this is an archetype we see on the show, these shows quite a bit now, which is, I'm gonna come in and make you play the game. You're not playing. Let's plant all the red flags and be loud, and then see how it plays out. Wayne, you were never going to make it far playing like this. Wayne, I thought was, we've talked about Marcel being the king of the face-off. Wayne was like the worst face-off person so far.
Oh yeah, because he had ulterior motives while he was doing it, being like, you know what, screw this game. Xavier, can you tell me everything about what you're doing right now?
Yeah, it's like, oh, your alliances, huh? Name them. Name your alliances. Which I was like, what are you doing? Also, not for nothing, I don't know, Wayne talked about how he knew who Xavier was. Like, do you remember when Xavier was tried? How did that work out for his opponent there? Big mistake here, because Xavier is very level-headed in these situations, but he will not back down. He's not going to let you just take the punches. He'll like respond. It's funny. So I feel like, like when people talk about what makes you mad, if you're in a confrontation with somebody, Xavier pushes the right buttons, because Xavier does he's not looking mad, and he's like, you're mad, clearly. I'm not mad. I'm fine. You need to chill out. That's worse to me than someone who's actively yelling at me. That gets a rise out of me. So you do not go head to head with this man. Xavier will win 9 times out of 10 here. And he did. He very much did.
Well, I think for Wayne, it's him coming in with quite literally the resume, right? That like this is a guy who has worked as a police officer and thinks that he could pull that sort of interrogatory approach, especially when he did figure out that like, yeah, people were getting really suspicious of him. Not even from an anonymous mode perspective, just more so of like, yeah, this guy is a little seedy. But I think he sort of served his purpose as just like this guy, to your point, like I do feel each of the intruders kind of had a different niche to fill. And Wayne's was definitely the type that comes in, decides, I'm going to make a big splash immediately. I have to make an impact in this game if I want a chance of staying. And as a result, just gets in his own way way too much, but in a very entertaining manner.
Listen, this is how I feel about this character on these shows. For your game, I hate what you did. For my entertainment, you nailed it. Like you knocked it out the park, because that was a very fun, tense face-off, and we wouldn't have had that without this. Also, it always tickles me when someone's like, I'm gonna pledge loyalty to this. I'm gonna work with this guy, and then immediately be like, all right, let's put him on blast immediately. Funny to me. So yeah, he came in, he burned hard, fast, quick, and went out.
Yeah, so I mean, in this middle stretch as well, we kind of, I wouldn't say people are playing it safe, but I think a lot of these larger communal targets are being taken out. We talked about this with Tiana, who does end up getting taken out by Xavier. We have this with Robbie, who does have some suspicion on her, and people are getting onto her game. We obviously have Wayne, who's drawn a lot of negativity to him. And then, of course, we have the man that you've just been talking about who follows him out the door in Xavier, someone who, yeah, for whatever reason, it just seemed like it all caught up to him all at once, where even his tightest ally in Jack is like, yeah, you know what? I think we could do some very complicated math in a matter of 9 minutes. Don't worry about it, buddy. And if we don't win safety, what does it matter? It's like we're both safe, right?
I loved that moment where Xavier's clearly not having it. Like, I do not want to do 1,999 or whatever the number was. He's like, we need to go for a smaller number, man. I'm not trying to go home. He's like, no, I'm a math tutor. I got this. So that confrontation was a lot of fun. I think for Xavier, what was very evident to me, Mike, was that this Xavier's game kind of fell victim to everyone else starting to bond and trust each other a little more, because Xavier was kind of the glue to building this bigger group that was kind of looking at consensus people. And I think as time went by, people started making other connections and started feeling a little bit more like, okay, if I push Xavier, I can take a spot. And that's not a bad place for me to land. I want Xavier's spot, but I'll play it in a more low-key way where no one's looking at me. That and Xavier wasn't like in danger, really. I think that's the other big part of it. So that's, I think, what went wrong for Xavier. I think also the unfortunate fact of being known as a reality TV person also probably catches up to him here. We did see later some of the conversations surrounding Nina, but the fact that Nina was not completely locked, like Nina was not locked in as a reality TV person. She was locked in for some as the daughter of a reality TV person.
And not only that, but the daughter of a reality TV person who is not on a show that a lot of people were a fan of. So when I talked with Xavier, he revealed that, as you would imagine, he did not necessarily volunteer the information of him winning a reality show willingly. Basically, what he said was that there were at least probably like 4 or 5 people in that season who were Big Brother fans and knew about the cookout and knew what he had done. Whereas Nina, as she talked out with us, I did think did benefit from the fact that like seemed like she was put with a lot of Survivor casuals by comparison. Like obviously Jack was the one to make the connection, but outside of that, there seemed to be more Big Brother fans in this season for whatever reason than Survivor fans, which hurt Xavier and helped Nina.
Yeah, I think also not for nothing. We talk about the discourse for like what am I trying to say? What makes a super fan, quote unquote. And I think that one of the big things for me isn't, because I don't know, Mike, you are not a super fan. You're like a super quadruple duper de duper fan, because you have the mind.
Not Barney, not super de duper fan.
Is you. Because you have knowledge that I think the 0.01% of these fans have, which is if someone like says a run-on sentence, you're like, yep, season 24, episode 8, this person's boot episode. This is the moment where like you have that kind of a mind for it. And that's like next level. And I'm very jealous. But for me, a quote unquote super fan is someone who watches a lot of the franchises. Australia, New Zealand.
Right.
Yeah, like basically, if you're an English speaker and you watch the US one, you're looking for the other ones as well. And I feel like Nina benefits from not many people doing that. Because it's a very niche thing to do. And a lot of it, Mike, comes down to, do you have what it takes to find the episodes? Because if you have the wherewithal, the willpower to find it, then you've gone out of your way to do it. And I think Nina benefits from that. I think the other thing is, a fan that roams these circles or follows the people on socials and sees their photos. Like, that's the only other way you can figure Nina out. So Nina definitely benefits from that. And Xavier is basically a victim to the amazing game and season that himself and the Cookout put together on 23, which is not a bad, if that's the reason I go out, I'm holding my head up high.
Yeah, if you're like, oh, the reason why I got out in this game was because I was so good at another game, like, there are much worse reasons to go out. I mean, what Xavier also expressed to me, which I could see from his perspective makes a lot of sense, is that, to your point, I mean, it was basically like a big reversal of fortune with this first profile refresh, where he had been not only building a good group rapport, but had also, had a sense as to maybe who was who, and he had even just been the anonymous.
Yes.
And so, like, he felt like he was accumulating a lot of knowledge in the game, and then everyone's knowledge gets refreshed upon that profile refresh. And while that did help raise people up like a Lily, who were not in good social standing, it lowered people who were in a really good standing, like Xavier. Everyone kind of had to start over. And so what he reasoned as well was, not only did that then erase sort of all the information he had about other people that would help prop him up in the test, but also at the same time, it obscured some of the people that were closest to him, like a Nina or a Jack, to say, hey, if I want to get rid of Xavier, there's a much greater chance now that he wouldn't know it was coming from me. And so I can hide behind this new handle.
Well, that, and also I feel like if you're playing a character, right? So like if your storyline as an anonymous avatar has been Andy, it would be weird if you suddenly switch up and you're like Xavier, because they're like, whoa, what's going on? And I think Xavier nailed it, where if I feel like Xavier may have figured me out and we're working together, I cannot bring his name up, because then if he thinks it's me, it's curtains. Like, either he's going to retaliate or this can seep up into the real world upstairs. Like, I don't need that. But new avatar means new avenues, baby. Like, I can now come in. You don't know it's me. I can be like, you know what? Xavier's been having an easy ride. And it allows me to build this new character where I'm not all Andy. I can now say someone else's name.
All right. Well, as we often see sometimes in these shows, Pooya, Jack helps take a shot at, a big threat to win and follows him right out the door. I mean, I was very surprised. We came out of those first 3 episodes, especially being like, Jack's got a good lock on this game. He's someone that knows these types of games very well, even though this is something completely new. He was acing the tests. He was winning anonymous for the first 2 times, and like truly did seem like he was in good with everybody and nobody suspected him. And at least from our perspective, it seemed like he got a little too confident. And despite suspecting that Nina is related to Sandra, he decides to let this information loose of like, yeah, I want to go after the couple, but I feel like Christopher is someone that is much easier to manipulate, so we should keep him around. And Nina does what is part of her DNA at this point, which is like, oh, you tell me this stuff, I'm going to go spread it around like it's gospel and get you in trouble.
Yeah, so Jack was a very fun character. I think somebody who understood the assignment, really picks up the format and adapts to it and tries to apply other games that he's seen, other shows that he's watched into it. First of all, this picture looks like he's part of the cast of Party Down. So this is so funny to me.
Are we having fun yet?
Apparently. So that aside, I feel like the thing for Jack, I think he got very confident. I think even, and I've talked about this before, even at your most confident, never tell somebody else that you think someone can be your lemming that you can take control of if you get someone else out. You're basically saying, hey, I can be the best influencer in here to this person if you help me get out this other person. I also think he wasn't subtle with the fact that he wanted them split up, but not Christopher first. We got to get Victoria. Showing that level of, I'm not saying he was unwilling to adapt, but showing that level of I'm digging my heels, this is what I want. Almost always people are like, I'm not going to give you that, because then you have the power. And I think also Jack suffered from success, not being really nominated up until this point, and being in a really good spot with a lot of people, looking like a threat himself, and then having Xavier go out. It's kind of like a game of hearts or spades. Once you break suit, once you get out a big threat, you're like, ooh, let's do this again, but this time with another contender.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that I think he really had his foot on the gas for the first portion of the game. And during this portion, he kind of coasted a little bit, where he was like, I do feel confident enough that I can let my foot off the pedal for a bit, not realizing that even outside of like, okay, Xavier's gone, who's the next biggest threat, there seemed to be some stuff accumulating around him. People starting to really compare notes and realize like, oh, wait a minute, Jack is someone that is not just this like nice, eager kid. He is someone that actually can do these things. I mean, the information won't come out until after the fact that he was the one that really threw his closest ally, Andy, under the bus.
Oh my
but
God.
certainly that perception of him, or that type of perception, was connected to him by the time that they do end up getting rid of him. But yeah, again, it was really interesting and goes to show how, well, Nina, I think, does end up winning partially because she was like one of the most consistent players the entire season. We still had very fun rises and falls of various characters, Jack being one of them.
Absolutely. And I think the big thing for Nina, aside from the fact that I truly agree with her that she is built for a game like this and really was in her element, I think the other thing is having a couple of seasons worth of practice in a show that runs close to 50 days the further you get. So like, even if you go out in the midpoint, it's been a month. I think learning the pacing and the marathon mentality of it really helps, because also this is the first season of this show and I'm doing 3 rebrands and there's new people coming in. Like, at what point do I realize like I need to pump the brakes or coast a little? I think the reality is you always have to keep an element of it. Got to keep an element of surprise in your back pocket. And I feel like at this point in the game, Jack kind of put all his cards on the table with one person who was not going to let him survive.
All right, well, let us move on to the second of our intruders here in Bisma. Bisma, another person that comes in with a history to high, of course, her being a political operative. And yeah, I wouldn't say that, again, it really shook down to alliances, but really, correct me if I'm wrong here, Bisma's story, Pooya, was kind of twofold. Everyone knew she was Eagle. She was sort of the, her alongside Christopher were the most easily detected, so she was never the anonymous. And B, she was kind of just like, linked up as this floater mentality, that like she was close with Lily, but she was largely unaffiliated. She had no party to her, in a manner of speaking. And so as a result, there were very few people who would be in power that would actually look out and protect her.
Which helped in the beginning. It helped in the beginning because people had these other targets they were looking at or eyeing for a little bit. But I think the closer we're getting to the end game, the more you really do need some shooters with you. And at the very least, some people who, if they hit that anonymous mode, if they win it, they're not going to look at you. I think ultimately a person like this can be scary in the end game for you, because if you are the anonymous and you feel like, she's not really connected, but I truly don't think she's a number for me, and I truly don't think I can have her be a number for me, kind of becomes the inconsequential sacrifice. Because in comparison, if there's someone who has like a couple other link ups, if I feel like I can link up with them, then they're still a better asset for me than Bisma would be. Because if I get in good with them, they might protect me from the other people. And that's a decent spot for some dominoes to fall. Or at the very least, I have one person working with me. Whereas if I don't think I'm going to connect with Bisma, she might just have to go here.
Yeah, what I find so interesting, and I wouldn't say that this necessarily applies to everybody, but it felt to me the prevailing strategy for who you should keep as the anonymous changed throughout the season from, okay, we want to get out somebody that just like satisfies the will of the house, to, okay, I want to take out people who are like either ones I don't trust or are not affiliated with my group, to then, oh, I want to take out people that I can't read, which is largely the reason why Bisma is eliminated. And this is also, I believe, around the time that it is announced by Danny what the final face-off was going to be. And so then it becomes an even bigger case of, okay, you want to ideally keep people around that you can read, not only for this final face-off, but also in anonymous mode. Like if you can pick up on little ticks and tells then that's going to make it a really easy test to ace, as opposed to, well, yes, we know that Bisma is Eagle, but like I really have no idea what she's going to do. And so, at least from like Nina's perspective, I found that was sort of the through line of her strategy. I wonder if that is sort of the ideal way to play a show like The Anonymous, but it was a really interestingly changing narrative throughout the season.
I agree. And it was, like I said, I did like that the three newbies, quote unquote, went at different stages, beginning, middle, and end game. And I think Bisma was fun, but ultimately, I think that the benefit of being someone who looks easily predictable in the game and not in anonymous mode is that, like you said, I kind of know where they're gonna go. If they land on an anonymous, I know where they're gonna go, and if it's not me, that's good. If you go into anonymous mode, what am I gonna expect? And I don't quite know if I can completely predict that I'm safe there. And I think the face-off being a big part of this format really goes against somebody who is playing a little maybe coy, sheepish, mysterious upstairs.
Well, let's talk about the someone who might be the opposite of sheepish, considering how extroverted Dylan was. And it's interesting because I think in the first few episodes, we kind of typified Dylan as maybe more of a vibes player, someone that was providing a lot of the entertainment, a lot of the color commentary. And it was interesting to see him attempt at points to really try to lean into the gameplay, whether it was him trying to make like a push for anonymous mode by really doing wild card stuff as Popsicle that he wouldn't do. But I would say more so Dylan was known for his more dramatic moments in person, whether it was, him going after Chris early on in the season after hearing he was throwing him under the bus, to obviously towards the end of his time in the house, him giving them the silent treatment for a whole day and then going on this entire monologue in the face-off about how he did it as his own test to prove that without him here, the show would be a lot less fun. Yeah,
basically telling them, this is boring. Without me, it's boring. It's quiet. You didn't like it. I was bored. I was like, well, you saying you were bored shouldn't really mean anything to these people. Were they bored?
More so means that you're entertaining yourself more so than you're entertaining other people.
Right, which is so funny to me, but also it was entertaining, and I think that's what mattered. I think Dylan is someone who, yes, at the beginning felt like it's going to be a lot more vibes. I was like, do I think Dylan's going to pick the game up as it goes along? But I think Dylan really got into it, and I think that was a really fun journey to see, and ultimately I would argue one of our bigger characters of the season.
Oh, definitely. And then also was a bit of a stumbling block for Nina towards the end, where he's like, I think you're gonna win. Almost like Angela telling Chemo, like, I would take you to the final too. Bit of a kiss of death.
Yeah, it was like, oh, don't say this. But it was so funny that Nina then asked other people, like, oh, how do you feel about that? That didn't make me feel good. Like, what thing? She goes, oh, you didn't even pick. Okay, nothing. Never mind.
And now I wonder if A, they didn't pick up on it, or B, like, did they just tune Dylan out at that point because of the other blow-ups that he had, that they luckily did not listen to anything he said on his way out the door?
That's the thing. If you've done this a lot, or you've spoken a lot of things, it might just be chalked up to it's one of Dylan's isms. Like that's all it is. And then you don't pay much attention to it. So maybe that helped actually.
All right, well, let's get into our final six, the people who made the finale, the people that Pooya, you and I had the pleasure of speaking with. And so working our way backward as we continue to do here, let's talk about Lily. And again, we talked about the rising and falling stocks of some of these contestants. Lily had definitively the biggest rise out of any contestant. Remember early on when like Christopher really turned the screws on her, being like, you're giving me nothing, you're not socializing, you're someone that we could easily get rid of. She feels very lost. She feels very secluded, to then becoming, as Marcel will coin her, the Lil Reaper towards the end, whether it's winning the Anonymous a couple times herself or like feeling like she has a good handle on the handles and being able to help shape, who ends up going. It was very fun to see her grow into her confidence, become someone that could hold some power in the game, and to arguably get taken out because of that right at the end.
I agree with that. I think that Lily would be given the, if we were doing superlatives, the growth arc, the most growth arc person of the season. It was so fun. And I think Lily will be the blueprint for how to pivot from your first avatar to your second. Because I think Lily does a stand-up job in the second one. And Lily, credit to Lily, probably the early adapter of Nina. Let's put Nina on the block. Nina on the block. And it was very fun. because on the other side of the coin, I feel like Nina constantly being thrown in there by one person was enough to keep Nina playing like constantly the entire time. And it was a very fun thing to see. I loved when Marcel makes the little balloon animal, like Grim Reaper scythe thing to give to Lily. I think that was hilarious. Lily was a great character, and I was so happy to have watched Lily get as far as she did. Would have loved to see Lily make it one step further.
Yeah, I mean, she had some maybe the best final words on her way out, where she, as she admits to us, erroneously thinking that Chris was the anonymous, saying things like the only people he really considers like peers are what, like strong men and single women, like it's been an absolutely hot fire. But yeah, I would also say what's interesting as well is she really benefited from Jack's strategy of pretending to be Lily.
Yes.
Because if you think about it, yes, on the surface, pretending to be somebody else is great because that puts you so much higher in the chances of becoming the anonymous. The downside of that is that if people are guessing Lily for you, that means they're not guessing Lily for Lily. And so Lily also benefits from your tactic. And arguably, that's the reason why she ends up becoming that first anonymous as Robot and gets rid of Xavier.
Yep, I think that is a big part of it. I think if I see someone clearly imitating me or people talking about, okay, with absolute certainty, this is Pooya. Like, oh, perfect. Because now that's one less avatar guess that y'all have and one better chance I have. Because I think the fun idea would be, can I figure out who is trying to play me? Like, that's a fun little game for me. I would love that mini game.
All right, well, let's move into our last proper eliminated player of the season in the form of Victoria, our final intruder. She of Vistifer, I think was the showmance that she coined to us. I mean, it's interesting because, again, we talk about the journeys of these people and, the rises and falls. To your point earlier, I think Victoria started off very strong. She is courting this, puppy dog romance with Christopher. But she's also like maintaining enough of a wild card position where she is able to be the anonymous in those first few times. Like, she's holding a lot of power. I personally felt like it petered out towards the end game. She does say at one point, she's like, I'm not really used to these types of games. I don't know how I feel about being evil. But to me, Pooya, the smoking gun came when, during Lily's boot, they're just kind of talking casually, and Victoria drops like, oh yeah, when I voted for her. And Lily is able to do the very quick math to realize that, yeah, only one person, she was the only girl who was nominated. Well, and so therefore Victoria
there were two girls. Victoria was the other one, I believe, if I remember correctly. But no, that really put the nail in the coffin, I think. I really do think that Victoria's slip up there kind of just puts the proof right there of, oh, you voted for me. Awkward.
Yeah. So, it was an interesting ending for her. I think, unfortunately, she is taken out due to this double whammy of her being linked up with Chris, and the two of them would be a force in the final face-off, as well as, I think, being a less readable person than someone like Chris. So by that caveat, she is sort of like the bigger threat of the two.
Yeah. And I think that this is yet another thing that really helps Nina, is that having the final face-off be 4 people, you do not want 2 people that, what you said earlier, kind of know each other and can pick up on each other's like physical reads as well, by more so than anybody else. So you're never going to look at anybody else but splitting the couple up. And luckily for Christopher, you're not available. So Victoria gots to go.
All right. Well, now we get into our final 4 who stepped up and picked those boxes. And we'll start with the 3 who wound up the losers. Let's talk about Andy. Because, yeah, you talk about learning on the fly. Andy, he talked about this throughout the season, especially towards the end. Like, partially came onto reality TV to become a winner and redeem himself from this quote-unquote loser character that he was mimetically made to be due to his association with the Fire Festival. And we got a little bit of that storyline, even if it didn't get him the big win, ultimately, where here's somebody who, to your point, is kind of just like the hapless guy who's there, doesn't really have any idea what's going on. His number one ally is purposely throwing him under the bus, and he has no clue. To somebody that is like, even though he never was the anonymous, to say like, okay, I'm going to pretend to be Christopher here in this final profile refresh, who I think was starting to pick up on some of the nuances of the game, was getting good with Nina towards the end. He didn't necessarily feel like a GOAT to me as to maybe the way that he started the season.
Yeah, the growth arc, the other person that got it, I feel like, was Andy here. Andy, who was literally the Pawn Star nominee of the season. And a lot of it had to do with Jack. The reveal when he finds out that Jack was the one who kept nominating him was so funny, because it was clearly like a, what are you doing? But also, that's the right way to play this game. I fully get it.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
That.
He's like, you know what? Maybe I've been playing this a little too naively. Maybe I do need to try some next level things. And I don't think it's a coincidence that like shortly after that is when we start getting into the second profile refresh and he decides to try a different tactic.
Yeah, and I think that he's somebody who definitely you get to watch his story play out from the beginning. And someone who, after we finished the first 3 episodes, like, Andy's not long for this game. So for him to then make it all the way to the finale was great. Also, I think Andy benefited from being an early nominee so many times, because then we get to this middle point where if I remember, like 7 people get nominated, Andy's not even on the board anymore. It was so funny talking to him and hearing him say, yeah, I felt left out. I got FOMO that I wasn't on there anymore. No one cared about me anymore. But it was a very fun journey for Andy.
Yeah, it's just very, very interesting to watch the way that he approached it, and whether it's also his like casual name drops of, famous people that he was associated with and random stories. I mean, also like some people tried to move through with the logic of like, well, he's costing us money because he's not doing well in the challenges. I find it kind of fun that a part of the meta of this season was like, people really didn't give a lick about those challenges that earned money for the pot. Like at the end of the day, much like the mole, it became less about, oh, we need to build the prize fund, and more so about, let me do things that make sure I get to a chance to win the prize fund in the first place.
Yeah, which I think we're about to talk about the person who probably was the most focused on, you're not making money in the prize pot, we need to get this person out mentality, which I don't think is the move on this show.
All right, well, let us get into him right now, because Chris got cross about a lot of stuff over the course of this season. And yeah, I mean, listen, when we talked through the first 3 episodes, we were like, yeah, he's kind of this stereotypical dude bro that you saw in like every 2000s reality show. And not to say he broke completely outside of that box, but like the box had a different wrapping paper on it, I would say, especially with, again, the way that Chris was able to catch on and change his tactics during that second profile refresh, to the point that he ends up becoming the anonymous. That being said, he did certainly fall into some of those more tropey elements, to your point, focusing so much on the challenges, shacking up with Victoria as well, being a bit more of a hothead, a bit more loose-lipped. But he had that sense of gamesmanship to him as well that did surprise me.
Yeah, no, it was a very fun journey for Christopher as well. He's someone who definitely, again, somebody who I thought not long for this game. I really was skeptical on Chris's odds to make the deep run, but I think he came into his own. And I think a lot of it also had to do with the fact that in the middle of portion, he was so called out as lipstick that I just didn't see where the wiggle room was going to be. Right. Once they did the last rebrand, which I wasn't expecting, that's when I feel like, all right, we got to see what someone can get with a new lease on life. And he really made good of it, which is great.
Yeah, and I thought he had a very interesting end to his game where, like, for various reasons, he is told to pick first and can basically do jack all. So he decides to quite literally throw everything at the wall, where 1 second he's saying that he got a lose box, then he's saying he got a win box. And then when someone asks about why he changed, he then changes back and says, no, I got a lose box. Like, that is kind of Christopher in a nutshell, and that he was a little emotional. He was a little dramatic and was kind of throwing everything out there because he was pretty cornered just due to the position he was in that final face-off.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's move on to the man who had it all in his hands except for a box. Let's talk about Marcel, because again, talk about another arc. So initially, Marcel, public enemy number 1, big gamer guy, someone that's perceived as being sneaky, starts getting thrown up as a nominee. Don't worry, handle refresh. Marcel's Snake. Everyone picks up on Marcel being Snake. He doesn't win the anonymous. he continues to be a nominee. He continues to win safety through these face-offs. And if not, there are bigger fish to fry. He does this final profile refresh and something clicks. He is finally able to evade a lot of the labels that were assigned to him through the first 2/3 of this game. He has this big surge late at the end. He wins the final 2 anonymouses. He takes out Lily. He takes out Victoria. He determines the order of picking the boxes and makes a fatal flaw here. You do not leave yourself up to reading a member of the Diaz Twine family, because that is always a losing hand, my friend.
Yeah, it's funny. So when we talked to him, he mentioned that one of the things that helped him with the face-off was how much he could mind game people while going and making his pick. I feel like he did the opposite here, where he put himself last. So there's not a lot of mind game for him to play at this point. He just has to make the final pick. So he's really going off of other people's reads and what they're doing. And that's a tough spot to put yourself as a clear thinker of these games. I feel like Marcel was the way he was describing it was, he was overthinking it, right? He's like thinking about, okay, this one instance, I remember Andy saying this thing to Nina, and then I'm trying to remember, was it this time? Was it the other time? And I feel like he got in his own head a little bit there, but it was a very, very fun season watching Marcel play. I think he did one of the things that later Christopher starts doing, which I think is underrated. It's to really lean into your avatar. And, you know, Mike, you would shine in a situation like this where you're just hurl puns about sushi or hurl puns about anything, because I think it's both disarming and it doesn't give people a lot of things to go off of. I think there were moments where I was like, Marcel, stop picking avatars that make it seem like it's you, Snake, the Crown. I was like, it's a little too on the nose, but I think it ends up working out because it's disarming. And I think that helps.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That I think, especially for him, it was such a change up in personality as well, where like, once I think he figures out that people are onto him as Snake, he just really leans into the hiss of it all. And it ends up coming back around when people are like, oh, you know what? I like that cute little thing that Snake was doing. But then once he gets Crown, he's then able to, like you said with Christopher, almost pivot in the exact opposite way that Christopher does, where Chris starts doing spilling the tea puns. Marcel is able to refresh and be like, okay, let me come in with a bit more of a level-headed perspective that would wear a crown. And he is able to benefit from it. I mean, he was also just such an entertaining presence. You know, I would not necessarily want to take pleasure in people's misery, but like his incredible amounts of frustration and anger at like being nominated all the time was entertaining, because then it just led to this like exultant victory when he does win these face-offs, when he does become the anonymous the last 2 times. It was a very fun journey for Marcel as well. And though it ends up with him, you know, coming up a little short, he was one of the stars of the season to me. You know, definitely proving why he is as successful as he is in his career. He does a great job reacting to things. Like, he, in my opinion, was the most entertaining persona in anonymous mode, where you're just interacting with a screen. Marcel always made a show out of it.
Yeah, and this is my big thing. I feel like there's, in the reality TV space, when we get content creators come onto these shows, I feel like the TikTokers have ruined the reputation, because they'll come in and people are like, well, they're just here to make followers. They're here for that influencer life. Marcel's someone who his subscriptions speak for itself. He's a very successful YouTuber coming onto the game to play the game. Because I've said this before. I've said, for example, a celebrity Big Brother to come back. Give me 14 YouTubers or Twitch streamers, but you have to pick the right ones, because these people are game oriented. They're mentally competitive. And, you know, the face-off is a concept that you see on, we talked about how it's like a thing you'd see on like a late night circuit. You'll see it on YouTube as well. A lot of YouTubers play stuff like this. I think that Marcel really fixed the name for a lot of people of the quote unquote influencer side of things, that no, they can be just as competitive and cutthroat and willing to play the game. And they know how to have fun with it. You know, sitting there, you're talking about talking to a screen and making it entertainment. That's streaming, my friend.
Exactly.
Yes, you talking to a screen for like 4 hours.
Yeah, part and parcel with him. So yeah, and happy that he was a master of the parcels as well when it came to those face-offs. Like, I love the first face-off where he picks the first one and is safe and is like, it's safe. I'm safe. And nobody believes him because of, again, these preconceived notions. And so nobody picks him. And it turns out he was telling the truth the whole time.
That was so funny to me. I did love that.
Last, but certainly not least, Nina Twine. As we talked about in an interview with her, Pooya can't spell Twine without win. It just runs in the family. And here Nina is able to take home her first victory. And yeah, I mean, it was a pretty clean game, especially for a brand new season. I just think, to your point, not only Nina's previous experience in Australian Survivor, where you're just living in this pressurized environment 24/7 and having to rely on body language and unconscious cues, but also just like her general temperament. This game did feel a bit tailor-made for her, where she was able to like be cutting behind the scenes and be shrewd, but then to your face, like she will absolutely kiki with you and be all smiles and be very social. Like, this is why she was such a big presence in her first 2 Australian Survivor seasons. And this is a large reason why she ends up emerging $80,000 richer.
Yeah, I think that Nina's personality really fits this show format, because I think for a lot of shows, the confessional, the DR, that's where you can say all the stuff you want to say. But because all of that game is done in person, if someone finds out you said something about them, they can just confront you and start a whole ruckus. Nina didn't have to think or worry about that at all. And also, Nina would not respond that way. I don't think Nina gives you that confrontation that you're looking for, but she was able to navigate this game flawlessly. I told her this to her face on the interview, but having Nina be our first winner, we've seen how impactful the first winner of a show can be for that franchise's health and future. And I think Nina was a great winner. There were other people that had they won, I would have had the same feeling. But I think also having someone be the winner that potentially is more of a known entity to some people could also put more eyes on this show, could also put more intrigue for the show. So I think it's a net positive on all fronts. And I'm just happy for Nina. I'm happy for Nina to get her own, like to be in the reality TV circuit and have your mom be a 2-time Survivor winner, one of the only 2 people to have ever done it. It must feel nice to be like, I got my own W under my belt as well.
Well, especially in a brand new game. Like, I feel like there are people out there that even if she had won a season of Australian Survivor, they'd be like, yeah, well, it's only because, she's been raised with the show and like her mom taught her what to do. This was something that she could not train for. This is a brand new game for everybody. And Nina did a really good job of having a handle on it with her handles. I mean, she was able to become the Anonymous a couple times. She was able to pull through clutch in some of those challenges as well to win safety. She was one of those people that like very rarely felt in danger for me, where I felt like almost Big Brother style. She had at least some connection with everybody at some point in time, so that if they ever were the Anonymous, she was never going to be number 1 on their hit list until maybe the end, where again, on paper, it's like, all right, we're starting to put the math together. Nina could be this big threat, but people were thinking about other things. They weren't listening to Dylan's message. And so as a result, Nina was able to make it through, maybe utilize that meat shield strategy that Jeremy Collins did. And as a result, to your point, I think be a very representative winner of what the Anonymous should be as a game, in that she was like a master of the challenges. She was a master of the in-person liaising. She was a master of the Anonymous mode. And so I think she handled every facet of the game at least pretty well to very well, and was, in my opinion, the most well-rounded player of the season.
I agree. And having that person be the blueprint to which future contestants are going to try and compare and work towards is great, because that means that people are going to not take the social game for granted. They're not going to take the Anonymous mode for granted. They're not going to they're going to work on every facet. And I think that makes for an entertaining game. And I think she played a very entertaining game. So I'm happy that she gets to represent the show.
Yeah. And be sure to check out our interview with her. I think that she did also a fantastic job just vocalizing her game in a way that we can't even bring justice. So again, another incentive to go check out those lovely interviews.
We could have talked for an hour. It was so much fun hearing her speak about the show. I feel like I had a thing I was going to say, but I forgot it. So in Perd Happily fashion, I'm not going to say it.
There we go. Well, Pooya, we are hoping for a season 2 of The Anonymous. It seems like there's a couple things communally on our wish list. We would like episodes to end with eliminations. We would
Yes.
like a different way to determine the final, to determine the winner away from the face-off. Is there anything else from an overall perspective that you want to see on a season 2 should it come about?
Okay, so in order to say that, I gotta think of stuff that I would like to keep first. I think keep the avatar refreshes coming. I'm fine with this. I think you nailed it with 3. I would say maybe the second portion was a little longer. Maybe one round earlier you introduced the third. Maybe that's the only thing I would change there. I feel like what's something new I would like to see? I thought the challenges were a good balance as well. We didn't talk about those a lot because we typically don't, but
yeah, there were like
yeah.
a couple of physical based things, but like the most physical thing these people were doing were like making their way through fog to put balls in each other's tubes and
Right.
tubes and like throwing balls into holes. Like there was not any contact sports happening, luckily enough.
Yeah, which I'm happy about. The mental stuff was good. The slide puzzle where Nina had to navigate everybody was very funny, and I think that worked out well.
Did you like Wordle with the random objects?
Yes, I did like Wordle with the random objects. That was a good time as well. So the challenges, I think they're fine. I think, honestly, this is funny, but I think the biggest thing for me is if they could only change one thing, just for the broadcast, put the elimination at the end of the episodes.
Right.
Because if you keep this exact show the same way, I think I'd be fine. I also agree with you, though. Lower the number of face-offs. Either make them be like half the amount they were, or keep it for the final. I don't know how you want to go about it. I understand that you need it a couple times for it to be the matter in the final like that, because otherwise it is a bit of a crapshoot. It is kind of like the first time where Marcel gets it and keeps it because no one kind of has figured out how to play the game. But maybe lower the fit. Don't let I don't want it to be predictable, right? I don't want people to just be like, all right, well, we had a challenge last time, so there's going to be a face-off this time. I don't want them to know. Keep them on their toes.
Yeah, what I did find interesting is the one time where they did a face-off, but it was among all the people that were safe at that point. Because remember, like only 2 people were vulnerable.
Yes.
So I would say that I personally want sort of like in the traitors, how it's evolved now, where a shield is basically offered every round. I want that to be the case. I want, no matter what the challenge is, to have some individual safety as a reward, whether it's for the person who did the best, whether it's for like, oh, you're actually going for this thing instead of going for money for the pot. I want that because not only is that going to be a fun constant, but then I think it's going to, of course, make paranoia run rampant as to like, okay, if you're going for the safety, what does that say? I want that to be more of a constant, just because I think I don't know, maybe it's just because I like watching Survivor where individual immunity is back up for grabs every single round. I think it's something that would be fun to do, but honestly, outside of that, I think it's just continuing to let the players play. Outside of these small things that they did with the refreshes and the intruders, like they pretty much just let things fall where they did. And as a result, we were able to have people figure out the game as they went along. It felt like there was a lot less hand-holding than you may experience on the first season of a lot of shows. So if we're considering this a trial run, a beta version, I would say that like we're pretty much ready to launch. I think that the quibbles I have are pretty small and mostly structural, but I think by and large, this is a format that should get a season 2. And I do wonder, looking at something like Deal or No Deal Island, Boston Rob sticks out like a sore thumb, shows up as the only reality TV person. Then we get 3 of them on the next season. I don't know if the Anonymous caught on from a numbers perspective as much as Dondi did, but I do wonder, after seeing Xavier and Nina on there and doing so well, if it might incentivize other reality stars to try it out should there be a season 2.
I think other reality TV stars would be willing to try it out. I hope, because I think one of the other things I really liked about the Anonymous, yes, it was great to see Xavier back on my screen. It was great to get Nina back on my screen. And it was great to meet Andy, who I did not know because I've never watched the documentaries for the Fire Festival. So I had no idea who this man was. But I don't love this new direction we're taking on reality TV or some of these shows, which is, all right, now we're going to cast half the group to be reality TV people, half civilian, or then just full reality TV people. Because I will argue that while I did love Nina, I'm happy Nina won. Nina was the person I wanted to win. I'm so glad we got to meet some new people who actually were giving me entertainment. Like we just talked about how good Marcel was. Jack was a very fun early to mid-season character and gamer. I feel like Dylan was super entertaining. Victoria coming in and kind of immediately ingratiating herself with the group, locking Christopher in as an ally, throwing him under the bus in Anonymous, then becoming the Anonymous. Lily from ashes to a phoenix pretty much by the end. These were such fun characters. And again, first season, first attempt, they nailed it. You mentioned that they kind of let the people play the game. This could have gone horribly wrong. It didn't. They really showed what they were. So while I do like seeing people that I already know play these games, and it might sound like I'm complaining, let me be the first to say I'm pumped for this new Traitors cast that's coming soon. But I do hope we keep the door open for new characters to come through and get known, because you lose some of that luster. You do lose some of that new opportunity, new magic for it to be introduced into the group.
You heard Pooya, folks. More influencers, less reality stars on the Anonymous.
Don't you dare try and clickbait me, Mike. I will not be clickbaited.
There we go. Well, Pooya, I'm hopeful that a lot of people enjoyed what they got to click on here and check out. Yes, I know that unfortunately it was not weekly coverage, but we had a lot of fun getting to stop in here and talk about our thoughts overall on the season and the cast, and possibly looking ahead to a season 2. But as we fade off here and leave the roundhouse and the square house behind, Pooya, you've got plenty of shapes out there in the form of all the other podcasts you're doing. Why don't you plug what you got for the listeners?
Yeah, they call me Shapes Ahoy.
That's an overrated cookie, according to some.
It could be good. The chewy one's really good. Okay. So I've got 90 Day Fiance right now. I've been covering this new season. Kirsten's my latest guest for that one. Liana and I are talking Masked Singer every week. This is our final season. It's our last hurrah on the Masked Singer. So have you check that out for that. And we will venture into a different journey after this. So we're not done podcasting together just yet. Also, there's a third show. Why am I blanking?
Traitors.
Oh, Traitors Canada. I've been working very hard. Traitors Canada has been a lot of fun.
This is the one who nose is closest to this tree, so you're definitely not seeing the rest of the forest.
Yeah, the one show that I'm doing 3 podcasts a week for, I just forgot in the midst of the moment. Traitors Canada has been a lot of fun. Speaking of reality TV alum that are there, Netta from BB Can is there, and it's been a delight to watch her on my TV screen once again. Myself and Scally talk about it every week, including a live recap right after the episode. Ooh. Mike, the host of the Traitors Canada, actually mentioned that she doesn't miss an episode, and she loves our podcast and our insights. So,
I mean, could we theoretically spread a little bit of propaganda and say that the host of the Anonymous loves our podcast as well, considering there isn't one?
Yeah, the host of the Anonymous said that they don't go to sleep until they hear our insights, so they've been awake for a while.
You can print that, folks. Send it to the bank. And Pooya, you're streaming, you're podcasting, you're letting it all happen.
Hell yeah.
Thank you for there we go.
Thank you over there. But yeah.
Woo, look at that. Yes, thank you for coming in and shining as bright as the neon behind you. Of course. I'm doing the Survivor beat. I am doing weekly exit press for Parade, doing the B&B with Liana every week, which is a really fantastic time about such a messy season. Over on the scripted TV side of things, I'm talking The Penguin, which has been a lot of fun. Ooh. I do TV for real with Sasha Joseph. I've gone back into covering Battlestar Galactica with Josh Wigler, and there is plenty more on the horizon from both a reality and scripted perspective. So thank you all so much for listening to this, to hopefully the interviews as well. It was a great time getting to stop back in and cover the Anonymous, which we both really enjoyed. And hopefully we'll have a chance to get back together and talk about it at some point as the show comes back for a season 2. Let's put it out there in the world. Thank you all so much for listening. Thank you, Pooya, for your fantastic insights as always. Until next time, everybody, take care. Bye-bye.